one, and we are live.
Hey everybody, good evening. My name's Ryan Catherwood. Welcome to Higher Ed Live. I can't tell you how frantic we were behind the scenes trying to get everybody together. It's a little harder than I thought it would be to get the technical difficulties squared away, but here we are. It's Thursday night. I'm privileged to guest host Higher Ed Live. Thanks to M. Stoner and for the Higher Ed Live folks for the opportunity. My day job's at Washington and Lee University, where I'm the Assistant Director of Digital Communication and Social Media. Please be sure to follow the conversation tonight on Twitter at Higher Ed Live, and you can follow me at Ryan Catherwood. As you all are aware, tonight's show is about alumni engagement, with a special emphasis, I think, on professional networking services. We're going to discuss what makes a great networking event, how to complement an event-based professional networking strategy with digital and social media components. And our guests tonight will offer some examples of what's working for them. The concept for tonight's show came after having read Jeff Young's article posted to the Chronicle of Higher Education called Alternative Networks Challenge Colleges' Roles in Alumni Job Searches. And I don't think it's very often that we actually take a look at competition to our efforts as alumni engagement professionals, but they're out there. If you haven't read the piece, we're going to tweet out a link to it. It's a great read, and we're thrilled to have Jeff on the air with us tonight. We're going to talk about the article with him first off, but first a word from our sponsors. Omni Update is the leading web content management system CMS provider for higher education. The company's web CMS OU Campus is secure and scalable with great tools and features, deployment flexibility, and an awesome user community. In fact, it was the highest rated CMS in customer satisfaction in 2010.edu Guru survey. So if you need a CMS, check it out at www.omniupdate.com. Higher Ed Live is also sponsored by Integral, the creators of the Schools app, a private Facebook community to boost enrollment and retention. Check out their blog, Integral Insights, for posts on admissions marketing, student engagement, and social media in higher education. We're tweeting the link out to the blog now. Okay, back to our show guest. Jeff Young is the technology editor for the Chronicle of Higher Education, and he writes a monthly news analysis column called College 2.0 that tracks how tech is changing colleges. He's also co-editor of Rebooting the Academy, an ebook published by the Chronicle. His freelance articles on technology have appeared in the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, and the New Scientist magazine. You can follow Jeff at JR Young. Excited to have Jeff with us tonight. Also joining us are two of my favorite alumni engagement professionals. Kim Brown is Assistant Director for Alumni Programs in Syracuse University's Career Services Office, and also an adjunct professor, which I just learned the other day.
Whoop, whoop.
At SU's Newhouse School. She's perhaps better known, and I can agree with this, by her Twitter handle. She is at Kim in Cuse, and Kim blogs for the local newspaper on Syracuse.com and also has a weekly social media career segment on the local television talk show, Bridge Street. Last but definitely not least, Michael Skro has been a higher ed education professional for over 15 years, beginning his career in Res Life and student activities before moving to alumni relations and marketing. Michael is also a Syracuse native and currently the Director of Alumni and Parent Relations at SUNY Oswego. He is the founder and a frequent contributor to the blog Alumni Trending, which is how I know Michael the best. Well, thanks guys for joining us. I'm glad we're all here and in one piece. We're only a little bit late, but let's get started. Jeff, how are we doing tonight?
Good, good. No, thanks for having me. This is a treat to be on with you guys and to get to learn of all the things I left out of my stories.
For the folks who haven't had a chance to read your article yet in the Chronicle, could you give a little bit of a summary and then kind of perhaps any conclusions or observations about the competition facing alumni offices?
Sure, yeah. No, and I, as you know, at the Chronicle, we try to cover technology as, how it's affecting various parts of campus. and I was talking. I heard this story. This particular column started when I just was talking to Michael Staten of Integral, and he was telling me this anecdote, basically, of just kind of just chatting about how he had ended up going on this cruise ship party and shaking hands with Michael Branson, and he's like whining and dining and all this stuff, and I'm like, this is a pretty great story. He's like, yeah, and this is going to replace like alumni networks, and I'm like, what? So there was sort of an interesting. He kind of was the one that had this argument, which I cite his white paper about whether a certain kind of thing that goes on, especially in Silicon Valley, but I kept interviewing people, and I think there's more to it even than just his argument. But I think, he was saying that in Silicon Valley, I think he's in San Francisco, but out there where there's all these entrepreneurs like himself, and people are looking for connections, and there are all these new ways that people are developing of young people connecting and having these parties, not all of them as elaborate as this example he gave me, which is this group called the Summit Series, which I had never heard of, but they have gotten a lot of press recently for the most recent thing they did was buy a mountain in Utah to host events, but they're very expensive parties. But if you can get the invite, they're sort of, if you get invited and you can afford to pay $3,000 or more to join this party, you're going to be connected to these, you're going to have these other people that could help your career, right? That would be other entrepreneurs, maybe funding, venture capitalists, or other people that could help you out. And so in some ways it was an interesting thing that this notion of what if the thing that colleges do that really people just take for granted as part of college, right? It's you go to college, and one of the things you get is there's an alumni network of people. You can drop that name. You can work, you can have explicit connections with the alumni offices doing a lot of work there. But what if other entities came out and actually did it and tried to do it even better? And that was Michael's argument that the other people were. And then, like I said, I was looking around, and I talked with Sebastian Thrun, who's pretty well known these days for starting the MOOC company Udacity. And he was arguing that even things like, he totally agreed and said even things like, his own company, which is providing kind of headhunting services of a kind. And so if you took a free MOOC and then got matched up with a company through that, that's a kind of alumni type relationship, but you're never having a college experience. And then he even mentioned these hackathons, which for people who are familiar with those, they're becoming increasingly popular for especially those who are doing coding and design to get together in a weekend and build something. And sometimes people are starting to make connections there that are the kind of things that these are more than just kind of clubs like a bowling league where you meet up. These are people actually building projects. And so then you start to ask, well, what is it about colleges? How does that college alumni thing work as a whole, holistically, and is there any possibility that something like that could come in? And so I was just trying to raise that question, and having that anecdote of the cruise ship parties replacing college as a hook, I guess.
Yeah, and I think one of the interesting parts about the conversation is that you're trying to figure out, is this time? Everyone only has a little bit of time. Do you feel as though these alternatives, when you talk about the luxurious opportunities on boats and on mountains, will ultimately replace some of the opportunities that alumni offices can offer for professional networking?
Well, certainly, I mean, some of these are refined, and like I said, I think they're a way to get people into the story. But the thing that I also did a little bit on, and I think that you guys already know more about than I do, is LinkedIn, and how, for free social networks out there are used by people, whether they're in a college or not. But colleges are starting to try to either use those, and if they're not, then it seems like even LinkedIn seems to be launching quite a lot of services aimed at kind of alumni or alumni-age people to get their first job. And so that's the question, I guess, is, okay, maybe the cruise ship is a little bit, maybe we all can, very few people are going to maybe get there, but are there things that are absolutely free that students today, and matched up with these kind of in-person hackathons, which are also free, could something, with this age of social media and, these instant groupings, can this kind of pose a kind of a challenge? Or in a world where people are talking about unbundling the university in various ways, is it another thing that could be pieced off and done by others.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And when we talked on the phone the first time, we kind of discussed the idea of what makes a great networking event. And I think that that's a really important question that all of us wanted to touch base on a few times. Can you talk a little bit about what you think, from your experience, makes a great networking event, maybe over that dog?
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing is and as I was telling you when we talked, this is one of those things where as a journalist looking from the outside, I certainly don't know all of the ways in which colleges run events, but certainly just thinking just in my own experience, it's not always the times where it's explicit. I actually got to go for a story. I got to report on the TED event, the TED conference in Long Beach a couple years ago, and that was a big treat. And they only let me go for a day. We couldn't afford a real ticket, which is like $7,000. But I got a media pass and got to sort of see what that was like. And it was interesting, even in, the people just go to these talks, but in between there are these breaks where they have, well, for one thing, they have like the nicest cappuccino I've ever had. They're like a chef like a named chef had like put out the hors d'oeuvres, but there were all these people there. It was a really interesting mix of people, and I ended up chatting with an editor from a major newspaper, and through that connection, I actually later wrote a freelance piece for him. So, I mean, this is the kind of, we were chatting about like the talk that just happened, and it was not an explicitly networking moment, but I think the idea of getting everyone in a room sometimes is enough, whether there's a explicit kind of name tag that says like I need to talk about this, or that even at the time, none of us, I don't think, were really looking for that. Well, I don't know. Some of these people were, but I wasn't. I didn't think I was.
Yeah, and I think that sometimes getting people in the room together is half the battle. Networking is such an important part of what we do as alumni engagement professionals. I think of our job as really to make stronger alumni under the umbrella of the university. And lots of alumni are counting on us, I think, to provide these opportunities. If we can just create the right environment with our regional chapters or club events or reunions for networking to thrive, and then complement those initiatives with a great digital presence, we'll start to learn all sorts of success stories. I think that's how I think of alumni engagement. What can I give our alums to make them successful? And I think that very much includes the right environment to meet people. But for my money, there's no institution facilitating alumni success better than Syracuse University's Career Services Office. Did you like that transition? My friend Kim Brown joins us now. Hey, Kim.
Hey, Ryan.
Now you travel around to a lot of events, and
I do.
A lot of alumni networking events. What makes a great networking event, and what are the variables you try your hardest to control?
Well, obviously, a really engaged alumni group. I mean, that's so important to have alumni who love your university. So that's the first step. And luckily, Syracuse makes it easy to love them when we have a good basketball team and nice things to get excited about. But what I found in my experience in making a great alumni networking event is to make sure that the balance of students who are in the room it's on par with the number of alumni who are in the room. We've been burned a few times where we've had way more younger, newbie, brand spanking new alumni moving to a city, and not enough mentors for those young alumni. And so they've kind of been like, all right, great. So here I am looking around a room, and I'm with a bunch of kids who don't have jobs. So really trying to find a nice balance between your alumni who are well established and your alumni who are looking for that first opportunity.
And I think that that's a great point, making sure that the young grads and students aren't walking around wondering what to do with themselves.
Yeah.
And obviously there's a finite opportunity for alums to get to know each other in that space. And I think that's when the role comes to social media to kind of continue the dialogue. And can you talk a little bit about Working Orange in terms of how you take the networking event to Twitter?
I really like social media. I'm not sure if you've heard. I have a little bit of a love affair going on with Twitter. But anyway, we actually just launched at Syracuse this week. We just launched a new effort called Working Orange is the handle. And the goal in that is to have a guest alum tweeting every day, Monday through Thursday, because we figure that our students are not really alive and active and thinking about their careers on Fridays. So Monday through Thursday, we have one alum every day tweeting a day in the life of their career, what they do, what they studied at Syracuse, how they got their first job, what they do on a day-to-day basis, and then answering questions from our students and our alumni. So it's kind of like job shadowing meets Twitter, and you get a whole little networking thing going on, and you don't have to be face-to-face and get the awkwardness of that. And it's 140 characters of awesome, I hope. Like I said, it just started on Monday.
Yeah, and I've been following along Working Orange, and if you guys are looking for a great idea to execute for alumni engagement on social media, follow @Working Orange. I think it might give you a good idea of something you could do. So much of networking is developing a relationship between two alums that results in another meeting. So you get to the event, and then you have to figure out, each alum has to figure out, all right, who's a great person for me to ask out to coffee or to have an informational interview.
Right.
How do you try to facilitate informational interviews and make sure alums are doing the follow-up after the event?
Well, at the event itself, we actually hand out a little flyer which kind of says to them, okay, now you've been to a Success in the City event. That's what we call our events. The SQ is capitalized, cute, right? So Success in the City is the name of the events that we hold during the summertime. And at that event, we hand out a little flyer with some takeaway tips for what to do next. You've met these connections. Now what do you do with these connections? And then we have a LinkedIn group that's specific to Syracuse University, and the whole goal of that group is to facilitate messaging between alumni and between students and alumni so that they can set up these informational interviews, and just teaching them how that's done and how it should work.
I saw a great question come by on Twitter just a few minutes ago talking about asking the question, how do you keep a LinkedIn group sustaining? And I think that may even be, how do you get one going in the first place? How do you facilitate that sort of dialogue and get people comfortable, almost creating a culture of participation and discussion?
Well, we populated our LinkedIn group initially, the Q's Connect group that we have. We populated it with a group of mentors that were in this pretty antiquated system that we were using run through our Simplicity software. So we had the email addresses through that, and that was our first group. And they opt into this group, so by virtue of the fact that they're opting in and we're not putting them in there, I feel like that makes them more engaged and more receptive to reach out to the students. So, and then in terms of conversation, it's amazing how it gets going. If they understand that this is a group that's specific to career, they talk about what it's like to live in DC, best neighborhoods, starting this new effort. It's really kind of tends to take care of itself. And if you need to jump in there once in a while, so be it. That's part of our jobs.
Yeah, and to answer the question for Washington and Lee, I think one of the things that we did to spur conversation on our LinkedIn group was I asked about 8 to 10 social media professionals who are also alum to make posts, to get it going. And I think that frankly created the illusion of a culture that wasn't there yet. But after a short amount of time, I think people felt comfortable because there was that flow happening on the page. So create an illusion first maybe is a good way to start a LinkedIn group. But if you could, Kim, talk a little bit about Slice of Advice and your YouTube career profiles as kind of a way of showcasing how alums are continuing to help the mentorship of after graduation.
Yeah, so Slice of Advice, it's, again, everything is tied back to the orange Syracuse theme. So slice, just like you'd have a slice of an orange. Slice of Advice. We're a little hokey, embrace it, whatever. So yeah, Slice of Advice is our blog that's populated with student posts, with posts from our alumni offering their advice, their perspective, and then from our staff members as well in the Career Services Office. We tried to update it twice a week, and we were pulling our hair out trying to get enough posts, so now we're updating every Wednesday. And it's just a nice way for the alumni to, again, feel engaged, to be able to offer that perspective to our students and the readers of the blog. And then the YouTube channel, my background is in television news, so I was kind of into this whole video thing. And when I travel for these Success in the City events, the thought was, well, you're in the city, so why don't you spend your time doing something else? And so I came up with this YouTube video thought of shooting short little 5-minute video profiles of our alumni. Hi, I'm so-and-so, and I studied this, and now I'm this, and here's my advice. And it's so cool to have students be able to watch that, as opposed to sitting down and reading a long profile or reading a blog post. It's 5 minutes of their time, and you know, the jobs are pretty neat, so they've been really fun to shoot.
Yeah, and not only does it make great content, the video, but it really kind of showcases one of the best parts about the Alumni Network. It's that you're trying to facilitate these success stories, and if you can have alums sharing you know, what it takes to have a job like theirs, or why or why not you should go to graduate school if you want to have a particular job. Sharing of advice, I think, is one of the best ways for our alumni network to prove that it has value. And I think all of us are trying to prove that our alumni networks are valuable and worth the time and energy to be a part of it.
Totally.
Kim, and one kind of final question, in terms of if you were to offer, you know, someone really getting up off the ground, developing a professional networking platform for their university's alumni office, is there one thing that you'd recommend them doing first?
I think creating if it's going to be, you know, you're trying to do professional networking through your office, I would create a closed LinkedIn group for your alumni, because when alumni think LinkedIn, they think career, and when they think networking, they think LinkedIn. And if you're afraid of Twitter and Facebook is way too many engagement and baby pictures, if you're like me, that's all I see are things and babies. So if you want to stay away from those and really dive into, you know, the home base for all professional networking online, I would focus on a LinkedIn group, and I'm happy to help anyone with how to start a group.
That's great. Yeah, a couple of years ago, we were trying to start our professional networking group, or at least our platform at Washington and Lee University, and we kind of looked to Kim and her group at Syracuse for advice. So you should definitely reach out to Kim and her group, because they were very helpful. But one of the initiatives that we deployed at Washington and Lee was called our Alumni Perspectives program, and we asked alumni, similarly to Slice of Advice, to write advice-based editorials about the work world or graduate school or work life. And the goal was to replicate the act of networking, if you will, or the informational interview. And to date, we published over 100 of those perspectives on our alumni website, and so definitely make sure to check those out. I think they represent a great way to provide content that's helping to showcase the value of the alumni network.
Totally.
We found that not only the perspectives provided great advice, but they were another way for alums to give back to Washington and Lee that wasn't money. And it's a great way to engage when people feel as though they can give something that's not out of their checkbook. And so perhaps another reason to ask for content and to get a relationship building with your development office, it's maybe a good play to have those folks help you identify good people to write advice and perspectives and enhance the workflow internally. Another thought, but one of the best outlets, platforms I can think of for alumni engagement professionals right now is alumni trending. And the person who understands the pulse of alumni engagement, right, Michael, you understand the pulse of
Wow.
Yeah.
Sure, yes.
Why not? Hey again, how you feeling this evening?
Good, really great. It's hard to follow Kim Brown, but I will try to. I will try to.
Well, your alumni trending network, as well as your position at SUNY Oswego, kind of provides you a bird's eye view of a lot of the big issues facing alumni administrators when it comes to professional networking events. One of the biggest is attendance. Now, what are universities doing to get people to their events, and what makes an event attractive or not?
Well, that's a great question. First off, I think I'll take a step back and just say that, oftentimes what we deal with in any alumni operation is getting a comment from an alum that says, I didn't know about the event, right? And so when you hear that, your heart hurts and thinking, what did I do wrong to not market this event effectively? So I think a big issue to address issues of attendance and making things lucrative is just is really transparency. How are you marketing your events, and maybe being really cool about it, like SU, in terms of the taglines and things that they're doing. One of the cool things that we did recently, not that this is a competition, Kim, is to look at your goals for your activities and decide. There was really a difference, I would say, years ago, as we started building young alumni programming specifically. You can say alumni event, and people knew what that meant. I think now you have to be very purposeful in what you call things and very deliberate. So you have to say it's a networking event or it's an industry networking event. So be very specific. And one of the things that we've done that we think is rather cool, I don't know if anybody knows the feature on HBO called HBO Go. We actually have a new digest that's sent out every month to our graduates called As We Go. And it's not only a listing of our activity, but it's a bridge between activity and connectivity. So it's a listing of our events, and it also includes the Facebook event, the Pinterest invitation for the event, the hashtag on Twitter, the conversation happening on LinkedIn. Our goal is to really be very transparent about what we're doing, calling it the right name, and really marketing more effectively. And we're finding that we're getting better results in terms of attendance. And again, it's under the auspice of transparency, being very, very transparent.
Yeah, and I'm going to throw this one to Michael, but then I wanted to kind of open it up to everybody on the panel to kind of talk about it. And here we are on a Google Plus Hangout. Everyone out there in higher ed can see us right now if they're watching. How can we use something like this to facilitate networking on the web? And is this a great platform to have kind of a virtual chapter event or club event, an alum speaking on behalf of the advertising industry and tying in everybody, a couple people across the country? Anyone have, Michael, you first, but some thoughts on that?
Yeah, I would agree. I think it probably takes a little bit of time to get it up and running because there are folks who feel a little bit uncomfortable with what their online identity is and what it should be. And so I think it takes a little bit of education on how these things work and what the potential success can be. But I do also think that it's important to bridge what you're doing online real time and really get people off their computer and into an event where they're going to mix and mingle. And like what you said earlier about informational interviews, I find those to be incredibly important in terms of making connections. So I think it's a healthy marriage in terms of the online and the real time. But also, I think there really needs to be a little bit of education on how this works successfully. And then for us as alumni professionals, what are the best practices? Is it Google Hangouts that's the place to be? Is it using Skype? Is it using Twitter? Like, what's the best practice? And really defining that before rolling out a program to your alumni community.
Yeah. Kim or Jeff, any thoughts on kind of best practice as it relates to something like a Google Plus Hangout?
Yeah, I just think you have to be careful not to. Some of the biggest complaints we get are that our older, more seasoned alumni feel like, well, what's in it for us? Like
That's
Google
right.
Plus, we can't even turn on our computer. What do you want from us? So I think while technology is amazing, and obviously we've used Twitter, we've used Facebook, LinkedIn, Google Plus, etc., always keeping in mind how are we going to keep those seasoned alumni who are probably at a better stage in their lives to be thinking about giving financially, not that that's what it's all about, but how are we going to keep those seasoned alumni feeling like there's something in this for them as well? My thought.
Jeff, any thoughts on this kind of technology for alumni issues?
No, for me, this is all a very big learning experience. I certainly can't, tell people how to run their events, but I do think I am more respectful than ever of the amount of things that you have to deal with in dealing with alumni relations, because obviously, every year, and I deal with this as the tech editor at the Chronicle, is there's another thing that comes out every year. Right. This year, if it's Google Plus, then next year it'll be hologram in our living rooms or whatever, and then we'll have a discussion about that. And we do the same thing in journalism. We're talking about doing a a chat like this for, possibly for the Chronicle. So it's just like this is something I think that professionals of all types have to deal with. And I guess the challenge is finding that balance between the stuff that's always worked and the new stuff. When you're playing around with these things. I actually was curious to ask you all, one of the things that struck me in this, when I talked with somebody for this article, they were saying that, even just basic networking for a lot of students is foreign or something they have to be taught. Mm-hmm. And so talk about getting back to basics, talk about pre-Google Hangouts. And I can think back even to my own experience, and I'm sure I didn't, know anything. And so I'm not even sure I knew to turn to, the alumni affairs or where to go for that career services kind of thing to have not even knowing. And I was always curious, so that's kind of one thing I wanted to ask. But also in there too, I learned that some colleges, and maybe you all do this as well, help students with their LinkedIn profiles and their social media profiles. And I thought that was fascinating. That's something that, talk about a new service on top of everything else you do. So is that pretty much the state of the art these days, is to help manage that, manage both how to do people skills in searching for a job and how to do this new kind of people skills with the job market.
Michael, that that perfectly teed up the next question on the list.
That's right. If I could just answer simply, yes. Yes, that's absolutely right. I think as an alumni office, you find yourself dealing with a lot of requests or needs from a variety of your constituents. And I think I know that we're spending a lot of time at Oswego really connecting our students to our alumni and then giving them the best practices on how to do that. Whether that's through our mentor program, where our students sign up to be matched one-on-one with alumni mentors, and as part of that process, we have launched basically a boot camp to assist them with their LinkedIn profiles before they join our LinkedIn group, so they can make those connections and ask appropriate questions. And it's funny. Really smart. So as far as LinkedIn goes, I think it's certainly a wonderful platform, as Kim has said, to have conversations, to create opportunities to engage, but also identify new potential volunteers. I think sometimes, in alumni relations, we tend to work with the same volunteers because it's easy and because we know the people that have raised their hand. But you're always constantly surprised when you ask a new volunteer to participate and the success that comes out of that. So, and the last thing I would say about LinkedIn is that it's a growing market space, and I think more and more alumni in particular are seeing it as a value. I think in the last month, given the number of graduates we have, we've seen a growth of about 500 new people that just joined in the last month, which is interesting because it's been the holidays, so maybe people have a little bit more time to investigate, but we know that that's a growing market for us, and so we're seeing a lot more energy in that space.
Yeah, and I think at Washington and Lee, we actually set up 2 different LinkedIn groups, one specifically for our alumni, and they're really taking it and running with it, advertising. The chapter leaders are advertising their upcoming events. People are posting industry best practices, and it's definitely also a great place to post jobs. And now we only refer LinkedIn as the home for all jobs for alumni and internships. We have a separate group for that links, much like Hughes Connect does, our students with our alumni volunteers. But LinkedIn, I definitely think, is a critical component of any a professional networking strategy.
Ryan, can I add one more thing?
Please.
One of the things I think that we're all trying to do, and maybe underlying this entire conversation, is really giving both students and alumni the idea that networking is of value. I find that so many times people confuse job searching with networking. And, folks, when they're desperate for a job, say, I really need to network. Well, no, you really need to job search. You haven't really done the networking. And so you're using those terms in the same way, but it's not really what you're doing. And so that's really the value of an alumni network, and what alumni offices try to provide is those opportunities to connect before you need the job, so that you're really feeding your network and really putting yourself out there so that someone might call you for a job opportunity versus you searching for it. But I think that's one of the things that we're doing at Oswego is really educating both our students and alums about the value of networking. You know, we get the person who's been just laid off after 20 years in accounting, and your heart breaks, but they haven't participated for 20 years in their network and then are expecting a job lead, you know, and so that's hard to do if you haven't really fed your network. And, you know, the saying I always say is, you know, don't dig the well when you're thirsty. So I would encourage everyone to really educate your alums and students on the value of networking, and that it does provide those job leads as you really nurture your network.
Fantastic. And I wanted to give you the opportunity to give a nice plug for Alumni Trending. Can you talk about alum chat, since everyone out there is probably a higher ed alumni administrator? Yeah,
well, thanks so much. About a year ago, actually a year ago in a few days, I had started this blog called Alumni Trending, and the idea was our student affairs counterparts have such rich dialogue online, and I hadn't seen as much in alumni relations, so I just thought I'd take the lead and create something that would start to trend, hence the name Alumni Trending. And it's been wonderful. We've over 2,000 subscribers of alumni professionals around the world, including our friends in Canada and the person in London who've subscribed. And it's just great. It's just a free-flowing dialogue of best practices and really coming to some consensus on, what tools are you using to build communities and what hashtags work best, and whatever the questions might be. It's really bringing people together. And we have a weekly chat on Thursdays at 12. Next week, we're talking about alumni awards on Twitter, so join us.
Fantastic. And should a university, one of the last questions on the list is, should a university place guidelines on the types of regional events? And I realize it's kind of a changing of topic, but I wanted to get to it because we don't necessarily chat enough about the chapter events, clubs around the country. Could you give your kind of assessment on best practice associated with the regional groups around the country? How do you kind of script a cluster of events? How do you help them do what they want to while also moving forward with the university's initiatives?
Oh, go ahead, Kim.
No, I was going to say that would be you, because I'm in the career services office, so I have very little to do with our clubs.
One of the recommendations I would make is to take a step back and kind of identify what the goals are of both the alumni operation as well as the institution. One of the things that we did at Oswego was create a matrix of priority for the institution in terms of the cities that our alums live. And for example, where do we recruit from? Where do we play athletic events? Where do our students want to go? And we've basically gridded out in a ranking system of our cities the number of alums, the number of activities traditionally held, where are most of our volunteers, where do we play athletic events, where do we recruit from, and have given us some insight of what cities are top priority for us. So that gives us a better sense of how we position content for the future, so that we're thinking more thoughtfully about a New York City, for example, where there's a lot of interest vested in the institution to be down there to recruit, have activities, meet with donors. So we're thinking that this ranked system has given us a better sense of where we need to go, and I think that's been very helpful for us to manage expectations of the institution.
Yeah, and I just got to a random thought. Is every event a networking event, or can we circle back and properly define a networking event is X, and you can have events that are not explicitly networking? Anyone want to take that one? I guess where it comes from is that we often have events where we have university guests at Washington and Lee that visit the chapters and offer presentations, and they're not specifically networking events, but obviously networking is occurring. But perhaps another conversation.
Well, honestly, that was one of the things that came out in my article was that, you know, one of the people I talked to at an alumni office was basically like, well, we have Richard Branson come to our campus too. If you want to meet a famous person and shake their hands and you don't have to be on a yacht on a highly paid cruise, or in a way at a university you're already on that yacht, and there are people coming to campus all the time. But, you know, those aren't obviously, you know, those things are happening that might be kind of end up being networking for people, or a savvy student might go up to that person and, you know, manage to get themselves into some internship or some whatever with that person if they make an impression. But obviously that's more along the lines of like if colleges are actually encouraging students to treat the experience like that. But I don't really see students necessarily viewing college the same way that people getting on that boat for that party that I wrote about were viewing it.
Right.
So that to me was a really interesting thing, is that some of it is the mindset of the people, and in this case the students, and that maybe that's, you know, it sounds like that's what everyone's getting at too in some of the things they're doing with some of the informational activities.
Yeah, and I just saw a great tweet that says life is a networking event. So maybe ultimately
right.
That says it better. Good thing for Twitter.
Ryan, I would just add, not every activity is probably designed as a networking opportunity. You know, you have to kind of really build a circle of life in terms of your programming. You know, I've had success in building out activities for families. You know, so alums who can't come to a networking happy hour can come to a day at the zoo. And so that might be the opportunity where they might engage and network. And I think it's important just to know that not every activity is probably designed for the purpose of networking, but that might be just a side benefit as a result of getting people together.
Awesome. Well, listen, if you're a higher ed alumni affairs administrator, make sure to chime in on alum chat as a hashtag. Be sure to use higher ed as a hashtag. It's a great way to keep up with issues facing alumni affairs professionals. A lot of people on there on a regular basis. Michael, thanks for joining us.
Oh, thank you.
And now kind of a parting thought for everyone. I guess looking at the clock, we are kind of running out of time, if you can believe that. It was a lot of fun. But if there really is competition for time from our alums to expand their professional network, and it seems like there is. There are parties on mountains and on boats and something in between that, and our alums have very little time. We also need to make sure that alums realize that networking isn't just being there. It's about the follow-up. It's about the coffee date. It's about asking for advice. Attendance isn't nearly as important as what happens after the event is over, how you're following up with alums who attend the events. And we want our alums to be successful. As a content strategy, we need to tell the success stories. That's what we do, right? We're storytellers. We're alumni storytellers. These stories aren't news in the general sense. They're not alumni X makes achievement Y. They are specific stories about when the network is working and how. They are relationship stories, and they're much harder to come by, but I would contend that they are a lot more valuable. Now, when I say that these stories are harder to come by, I mean that you may have to go looking for them. Read between the lines of a LinkedIn profile, or ask a professor or a chapter or a club leader for a network success story. Who gave who a job, and tell that story. What amazing relationships occurred as a result of two people meeting as a part of the alumni program. Whether that's an alumni travel program, maybe two alumni met in Tanzania and they developed a business relationship after that happened. Got to tell those stories. Or two people who met as attending a conference, a lifetime learning conference on campus. These are the connections that we want to be making, and they're the ones that we want to follow into the future. But thanks everyone for joining us. Jeff, Kim, Michael, thanks to the M Stoner folks for taking care of us tonight, and first apologies to everyone for the tough start to the event, but hopefully everybody enjoyed being here. Thanks for joining us tonight. Again, please tweet at me at Ryan Catherwood, or connect with me on LinkedIn. I hope we can do this again real soon. For Jeff, Kim, and Mike, bid everyone good night.